So if you asked 100 motorcyclists what they love about riding, chances are 99 of them will tell you it's about the freedom or the experience. And if you ask Richard Worsham, he'll probably give you the same answer. But Richard takes those feelings of freedom and distills it down into its most pure form with Janus Motorcycles. Based in Goshen, Indiana, Janus Motorcycles sits square in the middle of the RV manufacturing capital of the world, which means he's able to source parts for his hand-built bikes mainly from within a 25-mile radius of his shop downtown. And let's put this out there. Janus Motorcycles are different. They're beautiful to look at. And to be honest, they're kind of slow. But Richard would tell you the exact same thing. He's intentionally designed them that way. And that's part of what makes them a blast to ride, even cross-country, as Richard has done a time or two. In fact, his whole philosophy centers around what he calls rambling, stripping away the technology that seems to constantly distract us and finding that raw feeling of freedom that we're all chasing on two wheels. This is Richard Worsham. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Richard Worsham, you are on Driven to Ride. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having us at your amazing shop, manufacturing facility, plant. I mean, this is a little bit of everything, isn't it?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for joining us here.
Yeah, it's super cool. We are in Goshen, Indiana. Can you kind of explain where Goshen is on the map of Indiana?
Yeah, Goshen. We're about 15 miles south of the Michigan border.
Okay.
We're in northeastern Indiana, so 2.5 hours east of Chicago. I don't know. You drove in.
Yeah, I did. It was about 2.5 hours. Not too bad. Yeah, depending on how fast you're going. But pretty close. Heart of the Midwest, I would say.
Very Midwestern, where Elkhart County is manufacturing central. We're kind of known as the RV capital of the world.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you guys kind of fit right in with that.
That's right.
Well, let's start from the beginning. What do most people know you for? What's kind of your claim to fame, in your own words?
My claim to fame is starting a very different motorcycle brand, Janus. We build lightweight, small displacement, low-powered, slow motorcycles that look like, I think it's fair to say, nothing else on the road.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretty unique, yeah.
Let's, before we get into the Janus motorcycles and everything, how did you get into motorcycling?
I got into motorcycling kind of accidentally slipped into it.
Okay.
I've always been interested in design. I come from a family of architects and designers, and that was some kind of surrounded me growing up, was drafting and seeing things, cross sections, as well as an appreciation for history.
Okay.
And so I liked cars. I was really into cars and exotic coach work. Really was what I was interested in, and drew a lot of that. Didn't really have much interest in bikes. Didn't really understand it. And then in my late teens, I got into vintage mopeds.
Oh, so
two-stroke 50cc. They were fun. They were goofy. You just had a lot of fun on them. Had a Vespa. My mother had an old two-stroke Vespa when we were growing up, so that was my first intro.
Yeah.
And then when I moved out here to Indiana to go to school at Notre Dame, South Bend is about 40 minutes west of us here.
Okay.
I brought, as my only means of transportation, a vintage moped, not understanding lake effect or any of these kind of concepts that we
Midwest
know.
Winter, anything like that. Yeah, sub-zero temperatures, wind chill.
Right. But to keep that bike running, I found this local shop in Elkhart, right up the road from us here. And the fellow who ran that, we made good friends, and I ended up started working there over the summers, really just doing repair work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through that the fun of these small displacement, lightweight, goofy things that I could understand. That
sure.
You can take one apart and put it back together again. Anyone can understand these simple machines, and because they're vintage mopeds, they needed a lot of work constantly.
Yeah, you need a lot to keep it together, a lot of love, but that's also how you get to know a machine or any kind of machine, whether it's a motorcycle or a scooter or a car. That if you got to get into it to fix it, especially if it's your only means of transportation.
Absolutely, but more important even than the machines, I think, was the friendships we made, the club we had. We had a moped club that we all ride together, and it was that riding together in a group. It was just like, it blew my mind how fun it was.
Sure.
And so that was pretty transformational for me. And it was then through that, it started I started learning more about motorcycles. And then when we started Janus, it was off of a 50cc moped platform.
Yeah.
And then we kind of realized, well, we've got to have a transmission and to be able to sell these. But after it was through that then my passion for motorcycles kind of blossomed.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool. So it was kind of a gradual thing. You didn't necessarily jump right into the motorcycle scene.
It wasn't like, hey, I saw Harley Davidson. I was like, oh, I've got to do that. or a Ducati or whatever.
Right.
Not that at all. It was definitely kind of an accident.
Yeah. No, and what a happy accident, to lead to here. So do you remember a moment that you started riding a little moped and you knew you were like hooked on two wheels?
That old Vespa we had was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a 50cc, so it didn't go very fast. But it was a hoot riding around Richmond, Virginia, where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
On that thing. It was a lot of fun. And then getting a moped, I don't know. I think probably what really did it for me was riding as a group. Mm-hmm. That was really fun.
Well, what about it was so special?
I don't know. It's just there's a sense of camaraderie and especially the ridiculousness of mopeds. There's blue smoke everywhere, and people are looking at you like, what are these people doing?
Yeah, and there's like, what, a dozen of you or more just taking over the road. And
absolutely.
Yeah, because that's something that maybe people don't know, but there are like scooter clubs, just like there are motorcycle clubs.
Yeah.
Are you still kind of plugged into that scooter club network or?
Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
There was the Moped Army was the group that was a national organization.
Oh, wow.
Founded at Kalamazoo, Michigan. That we were a chapter of, but we would ride with our own group, which was called Motion Left.
Okay.
Because nobody had turn indicators. But then you would pack all your bikes up together, put them in the back of a truck or whatever, and go to a rally.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In Cincinnati or Chicago or wherever. And then by that point you have like 300 mopeds going down Lower Wacker. And it's just like, that's cool.
That is cool. Yeah. To be a part of something like that is super cool. So, so you had all this experience. You slowly got into motorcycles. What drove you to start Janus Motorcycles?
Well, I mentioned that we were doing repair work at that shop. And then we gradually got into restorations.
Okay.
And then the restorations started selling. And then the next logical step was customization. And we actually had like commissioned custom moped builds.
Really?
Like wealthy people in Chicago. I think the producer for the Oprah Winfrey Show got one, ordered one from it was his business, my business partner's moped business. And it was really interesting. But we started finding the need to have different things done, like powder coating or polishing or welding up something.
Fabrication of some
kind of fabrication, something that our little repair shop, we didn't have a welder. We couldn't do. And so we started finding local people that could do that. And that's when we encountered the Amish. And we drove basically straight south from Elkhart. And you're right in the heart of this Amish manufacturing world. So a lot of people, when they think of Amish, they think subsistence farming.
Right.
But here in this part of Indiana, northeastern Indiana, the Amish are really more tied toward manufacturing.
Okay.
So the RV industry that we're surrounded by is a large portion of that manufacturing base is Amish. And it actually explains even their work schedule at these factories. It's because the Amish get up early. Well, the factory starts at the same time they do, and then they work until 1 or 2 o'clock.
Oh,
they take off, and then that's when they do their chores on their own farms.
Gotcha.
Run their own side hustles.
Right.
Et cetera. And then a lot of times they'll eventually break off and start their own business, which I can tell you countless examples of where that's happened.
Sure.
But we found a fabrication shop that was able to do, they had a history we heard of making, they'd done some funny car chassis for somebody.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And they had attempted to do bicycle frames.
Okay.
And so we're like, let's connect these two. Maybe this is the perfect place.
Yeah, maybe we can do this. You're right.
Yeah, that's who this chassis right here is 15 years later. Well, yeah, at this point, 15 years when we found them later, they're still making all these parts for us. And that story is true. Like we would ask them, who can do this? Who can do this? And it just started spreading. And
you just grew the network.
So I kind of answer your question. we were doing this custom work, needing things done. And then finally we were like, well, hey, I'm tired of trying to make this moped look like a little tiny motorcycle.
Right.
Let's see if we can start from scratch. And we ended up building something called the Paragon. I pointed it out to you up front. Up on the wall. We still have it up there. And that was our attempt to make a moped. We went to great lengths to engineer pedals to it.
Okay.
But the way we wanted it, from scratch.
Yeah,
so chassis,
completely.
Fuel tank, seat, everything. Handlebars, we made it the whole thing. A swing arm. And we got some press. I think we were in, at that point, maybe Pipeburn was bigger than Bike XC, for it was, there was one of those big custom motorcycle websites.
Oh, yeah.
Ran a story on us. And we got a lot of attention.
Sure.
Local, this is also, I should mention, a very entrepreneurial area. We got a lot of people like actually telling us, hey, you should make these.
Oh, really? You're getting support from from the community. Cool.
And we did.
Yeah.
And that was really that was the genesis of Janus, was coming from this moped background, getting tired of working on other designs and wanting to do it from scratch. So I think you all were commenting on, these look like it's not a parts bin, it's from scratch as a cohesive whole. And that's absolutely true, because that's exactly what we've done, is tried to make it to an almost ridiculous level. I was saying before, I don't think I maybe do it as radically as I have, but or maybe would have taken some shortcuts, but we've really been able to design it from scratch exactly the way we want it to.
And that's awesome. Because you said, you did the design, you designed these motorcycles, and you come from a family of architects and draftspeople and that. Did you go to school for that?
Well, I mean, I did in an offhand way, but not the education that you'd expect for industrial design or product design. So my undergrad is in literature from a very small kind of liberal arts school.
Okay.
Which I credit with allowing me to think differently. A wonderful experience. And then kind of on a whim, I decided to go to architecture school.
Oh, okay.
And specifically Notre Dame. Notre Dame, if you don't know, it's a very, very weird architecture school, because it's basically the only architecture school that teaches traditional and classical architecture.
Oh, really? Okay.
In the world.
So not like the contemporary stuff modern, that we see.
Everything is basically a version of modernism at this point. Most schools teach, and they very consciously teach a different. The first thing you do is learn the classical orders. The columns and types and how to. And every project is hand drafted.
Wow.
They don't use computers and watercolor rendering. And
considering it's like a Gothically styled school, aesthetically, that makes perfect sense.
Part of it. But anyway, there's a lot to dig into there. That's why I went there, was to study that, and really more for the architectural theory.
Yeah.
With one teacher in particular.
Oh, cool.
And I loved it, had a great time, and did do a lot of design. 3 months after I graduated, I started founding Janus Motorcycles.
Oh, geez. So it was like, go to school and then Janus. But I guess if you're working on, the mopeds and doing the other stuff on the side while you're learning, and as a student, it kind of is a natural progression, isn't it?
I think it was organic. It's just, I don't know if I would, choose to do that progression, or it doesn't necessarily make the most sense. But
sure.
But it's been instrumental in allowing me to do this, because of I would certainly describe these bikes as classical motorcycles.
Yeah. I mean, the first word for me is timeless.
Yep.
And how did you go about designing the frame? I mean, and the whole thing, because you did, like I said, you designed this whole thing yourself.
Yeah.
How do you even start designing a motorcycle?
For me, it's very much like, classical architecture or traditional architecture, where we rely heavily on what's come before us.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe a little foray here into this is worth the time, but
sure.
In a lot of folks, when they think of classical architecture, they just think, well, it's like one is like the same as the other. You're basically it's very derivative.
Okay.
It's just, you're applying the same language over and over again. When in fact, I would argue the exact opposite is true. You just have it gives you your range of potential options opens up. You're using these conventions in new ways. You learn how to break the rules, it's like jazz.
Yeah, you learn the rules so you can break them. And and I imagine with classical stuff, I mean, you're not just going back for the last 50, 100 years, you're going back maybe 1,000 years.
Several millennia.
Yeah, so you've got so much more to work with and to play with in that regard. So
motorcycles don't really have the same that much history to work off of, but that was absolutely kind of my approach to design was to study as deeply as I could the history of bikes. And so like, for example, the chassis is the starting point was, well, we're starting from scratch. We don't have 10 years of development behind this. Let's pick something that is a tried and true iconic design and then make it our own. So we picked the Norton featherbed frame, which you can definitely recognize there with the way that the frame tubes cross over at the headset. Now, it's a little different here on the Halcyon that has a hardtail.
Right.
It's kind of strange. But if you were to see one of our Griffin or Phoenix, you'd immediately recognize that chassis.
Sure.
I mean, the same thing is true of a lot of other parts of the bike. We would take a design and then play with it. And that's certainly true of our chassis. It's been gone through many different versions, and we've adjusted things. Our leading link front suspension also is sometimes one of the first things people will notice about the bikes. Like, what is that?
Yeah, what's going on?
What's going on there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to just kind of describe our design. Is we don't really focus so much on innovation for innovation's sake.
Sure.
Rather, it's like, let's find a really good design and then like adjust it and tweak it and make it perfect for our application.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. If it's timeless and it works,
right?
Why reinvent the wheel? No pun intended, really.
I think that gets to something about motorcycles is that the reason we ride bikes, at least for me, and I would argue for most people, is there's an activity that's like unchanging. It was the same for Curtis when he was riding his motorcycles or Buell or any of the reason all of us get on a bike.
Right.
We don't necessarily, our argument is need to keep trying new technologies and new ways to achieve that. It's pretty simple. Let's hone in on that.
There's not that much to it at the end of the day. Yeah.
So it's we're more about the activity that our customers are doing on the bike than we are about the technology that it takes to get there. And we've, in our experience, found that the less technology you use, the more direct that feeling actually is, that sensation, that experience you have on the bike is.
Yeah, so you've kind of built that experience into the bike. I mean, like you said, it's cool because it is a timeless design, but you've got modern stuff on it. So can you kind of talk about that mix between old and new on these things?
Yeah, absolutely. So Janus, the Roman god, that we're named after, has two faces looking to the past and the future.
Okay.
He kind of exists in the liminal between things.
Liminal space,
combining things together. January, I always tell people, is the month of Janus, beginning and end of the year. And so when we were setting out to build these bikes, I mean, it goes right back to the kind of what we were talking about. How do we make a motorcycle that takes advantage of all the beauty of the history of motorcycles? That we don't have to cover it in plastic or make it, we don't have those limitations of mass manufacturing. But one central aspect to the activity of riding is being the bike starting up every time you want it to start, it being safe, having and so part of that would be like good brakes. So why would you not have modern safe brakes, 12-volt electrical system, LED lights,
right?
Modern. So for me, it's really some people say we're stuck in the past maybe, or it's a nostalgia.
Sure.
For me, this is not a recreation. Well, one question maybe somebody will ask is, well, what bike is this? What period are you recreating?
Oh, okay.
I'm not recreating any period. This is a 21st century modern motorcycle that is trying to just look good and take advantage of what a bike is. So
yeah, the styling cues, are timeless, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. It can be new. Well, let's talk about that a little bit because I think on your website, on your LinkedIn, pretty much everywhere, you say you get a lot of why questions a lot. What kind of questions do people ask? You talked about it a little bit, but what other questions do you get about like why, that start with why, and how do you address those?
Yeah, you can imagine right off the bat, like the world, the motorcycle culture, especially here in the United States, is one of, loud is typically seen as a really good thing. You commented, wow, it's a lot quieter than I thought it was going to be.
It is. It is a quiet bike, yeah. But what do you expect? It's one cylinder. It can't be that loud. Yeah, but yeah. So
loud, powerful, fast, leather, black, whatever the things we can, adjectives we can add to this.
It's either a rumbling Harley or a screaming super sport, really.
Right.
Yeah, that's what everybody's after.
And technology, whatever, ABS, traction control, wheelie, whatever, auto shifting, all that stuff. That's kind of the name of the game that most people assume in motorcycles.
Sure.
So when you tell them, hey, it's 14 horsepower, they definitely ask. And then you tell them it costs $9,000. They're going to say, why?
Yeah.
And if they don't say why, their buddy is going to ask them why when they see it in their garage. And in retro, we've gotten a lot better at answering that question as we go along, I guess.
Sure.
Like at first it was really just no market research. This is what I want to do. This is what we want to build. We're going to pursue that. And but gradually, I think the fact that we still are around attests to the fact that we tapped into something that was meaningful to more people, and that is the idea that we've started calling rambling, and that's that activity that you do on a motorcycle. And so our answer to that kind of why, and I think this would answer most of the why questions that people have when they see a Janus, like, it weighs how much? There's just a lot of whys.
Sure.
As you can imagine, is we're building a motorcycle that is intentionally setting aside what we see as things that can distract from that activity, that sensation of riding, that experience, which can be all kinds of an obsession with comfort, cup holders, an obsession with smoothness or efficiency or speed or any number of things. We're trying to build a bike that gives you the most visceral, intimate, moving sensation of riding a motorcycle that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
And the old adage of it's more fun to ride a slow motorcycle fast than a fast motorcycle slow perfectly captures what we're trying to do. If you're into old vintage like British sports cars, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Or Colin Chapman Lotus speed through lightness. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the specs a little bit because I'm sure that'll have somebody asking why a little bit. But give me the quick spec sheets on you've got the Griffin and the Halcyon right now are your two main models.
Yep.
And they come in two different displacements.
That's right.
250 and 450.
Correct.
Take us a little bit deeper into the specs on some of those.
Yeah. So our flagship model is the Halcyon 250, which is sitting behind us right now. The Halcyon 250 weighs about 270 pounds.
Oh, it's so light.
Wet. Yeah. Very, very lightweight. It's some people might describe it as a minimalist bike. It's just pared down to the absolute bare minimum. It's narrow, relatively slender tires. It has a horsepower, about 14 horsepower out of a single cylinder, air cooled, carbureted engine. 5-speed transmission, leading link front suspension. So instead of a telescopic fork, it uses basically a swing arm on the front of the bike. And a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of the reasons that we make things the way we do is because that's what we can make here with our small shop. Everything is hand pinstriped.
Wow, that's
all
impressive.
Handmade leather seats and battery covers and back luggage. But those are the basic specs on the 250. The 450 is basically the big twin of those models. We've been the Halcyon and the Griffin 250. Well, I guess you say that the Halcyon's hardtail, the Griffin is a soft tail. Then you step up to the Halcyon 450. It's full suspension. We knew when we got to the larger bike, higher speeds, that we needed to have full suspension. It's a fuel injected bike at that point, about 30 horsepower, about 360 pounds. Again, a 5-speed.
Still pretty light.
5-speed transmission. Yeah, real lightweight.
Still pretty light.
Air cooled with an oil cooler, and very similar, just scaled up. And then we've just launched our Griffin 450. It's in prototype form, and it will be a more capable off-road bike. Than our smaller one.
Yeah.
Wheels, suspension, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it's right in front of my like field of vision, and it's this awesome brushed aluminum. It's a sick looking scrambler, and it's kind of got some rust and some love on it because you've taken it out, and I think you should just leave it like that. I think a ratted out like Griffin 450 would be super cool. So,
absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned that you work with what you build, or what you can make in the shop that we're in right now. Tell us a little bit about the shop and tell us what you fabricate here, because a lot of these parts and pieces are made here locally, in Goshen.
So we're in a historic dry cleaner right in the heart of downtown, behind the theater, coffee shop, record store, police station. It's real picturesque. And what we do here is assembly, as far as building the bikes. We're actually sitting in the final assembly bay. We can build 4 bikes in here. Skylights, a lot of natural light.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by the parts that will eventually end up on bikes. And right here, you'll see basically a bike starts as a raw frame and is built all the way through to the finished product.
All right here.
By one person. There's no assembly line. And parts will show up at the back door. We have a old black van we call the milk van, driven by Ray the milkman, and his job is to really how we run is that black van driving around the county, picking up and dropping off parts with our partners, our manufacturing partners. And so if I always say, if Janus had one factory and did everything under one roof, we'd be at least a city block big to be able to accommodate all that.
With a lot of parts.
But instead, we partner with these small, mostly Amish shops, and do all the different processes off-site. And then bring them in here. We're talking within about a 25-mile range.
It's pretty small.
Very small.
Yeah.
And then they come back here for final assembly, pre-assemblies, finishing, like pinstriping, and then final, like a road test, and they're detailed and ready to go. The other aspects of things we do in this building would be like all the sales and marketing and service work.
Right.
Design.
But I mean, you walk around and I mean, you've got a place where the wheels are made and finished. Yep. You've got the pinstriping station. You've got your wire harness and your electrics kind of station over there. There's a bunch of frames sitting in the corner. I mean, it's astonishing how much everything is made locally or, sourced locally, and 9% of it is all done here in the county, like you said. That's not done. It's not
pretty
normal.
unique.
Yeah.
Now, in some ways, it's just like how things are done in manufacturing here.
Sure.
But the fact that it's a motorcycle, it's a complete motor vehicle, is the really different thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because there aren't, let alone in the area, but I don't think there's really anybody like super indie kind of motorcycle manufacturers that are doing what you're doing.
Very few, if there are any.
Yeah. So we talked about rambling a little bit. What's some of the feedback you get? You get a lot of whys, but then when somebody actually throws a leg over one of these and takes it for a ride, what's the feedback that you get?
Yeah, it's either a memory of why they actually got into it in the first place. I think that's probably one of the most common responses we have is
that's
like,
cool.
Oh my gosh, I'm flooded with memories of that Trail 90 I had that got me into riding. And I would say a lot of our customers have quite a fleet of bikes in their garage, and they enjoy their Harley Davidson or whatever, or their Ducati. But this is a bike that they take when they want to just have a experienced motorcycling. But yeah, a lot of folks will, they come in and they'll just remember that immediacy, and I think we've done a good job of capturing that sensation of riding, where you're not trying to get anywhere, you're trying to get everything out of the experience.
Yeah,
and that's what the bikes are. That's what they do well.
Yeah. What was it like, after you designed and produced the first motorcycle and you took it for a ride? What was that like?
Oh man, it was surreal. I had imagined it so much. Just the kind of the trying to picture what it was going to be like to riding our own bike from scratch, and I've been able to recreate that with each model.
Nice.
It's really it's pretty amazing. And sometimes now it's like I'll be riding an older bike that we did a couple of years ago, and I'll be like, okay, wow, this thing really is nice.
Yeah, it comes back. It comes back. That feeling comes back.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a dream come true. Yeah.
Yeah, just because just from idea to reality is just, it's got to be unreal.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also because I'm so interested in production rather than custom at this point. Well, really all along, the goal, even with the first bike we built before we started Janus, was to make a production run of them. So that's what really gets me excited, is when you're on the 15th version and it's like a little better and a little better.
Yeah.
And a little better. Now we're on the 1500th version. And it's really fun to just adjust and make tweaks on that kind of production scale. That's what gets me up.
Keep going. Yeah. Keeps it going. So you've obviously ridden quite a few of these bikes, and kind of going back to people say why, I think there is a lot of people who think that you need a big motorcycle, maybe if you want to do any kind of traveling or touring. Mm-hmm. But you took one of these on a pretty big trip, I've read.
I've done several, yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So a couple of years ago, 2018, I believe, we decided to recreate the trip, the groundbreaking adventure of George Wyman, who was the first person to ride first person on a motorized vehicle across the U.S.
Okay, yeah.
Started in San Francisco in 1903 and rode to New York. So I recreated that ride on a Halcyon 250 in 6 days. I was riding with a bunch of these Iron Butt Association guys on BMWs, and they can put down miles.
Yeah, for sure.
So we did it in 6 days. It was tough, but the bike didn't care.
Yeah.
They kept telling me, a motorcycle, when you fill it up with gas and you turn that key back on, it doesn't know whether it's got 1,000 miles behind it or it's just starting up for the first time that morning.
It knows it's just going.
As long as you take care of it.
Yeah.
So I think that there are other motorcycles that are better at long distance, riding.
Sure.
Certainly.
Sure.
And there's absolutely a place for every kind of motorcycle. I'm a huge fan of all different kinds of bikes, but for the kind of riding that we're getting at, a lot of times the expectation that you need 100 horsepower or whatever else,
cup holders,
or cup holder, whatever it is like, that's actually what people should be asking why about.
Why do you need a cup holder?
Why do you do what?
Yeah. You don't need cruise control. You don't need ABS necessarily. You don't need, and like you said, there's a place for those, but
absolutely,
and that had to have been, a tough ride, but a super fun ride to be able to see the country on, and then just on ride, it's like back, in the art, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, kind of calling back to that, that kind of old school ride and everything. Yep. So, but for anybody that can, it says it couldn't make it. Did you have anybody who was like, oh, are you sure you're going to be able to?
Of course. Yeah.
And because it was a 250, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Which is not.
I was unsupported. So I had all my gear, all my clothes, all the tools, spare parts in panniers on it. And so I was probably cruising along at about 63 miles an hour. And the problem was just, you got to have a lot of time in the saddle to make 750 or 1,000 miles a day. Yeah. So I was just going, rambling along for 12 hours a day.
Yeah. But the other thing too is you get to see, if you're doing 100 miles an hour, and you're cruising, that's cool. But I feel like slowing it down really helps you, like, you see the area you're in and see the environment. It's like, I took a ride from Boise, Idaho to Yellowstone. And one of my favorite parts was going through eastern Idaho and the farmland and stuff. And it was just like, my buddy was like, this is like riding in a painting,
And that, for that kind of riding, like 70 miles an hour on a bike, like interstate travel.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but you're not seeing it. Anything less than that, the 250 can do. Mm-hmm. It's sweet spot. Sweet spot is 60 something miles an hour. And 2-lane roads, that's the kind of riding that you want to do on a motorcycle. When we're on a bike, we're looking for the curvy, picturesque road. We're not looking for Interstate 80. And so that's why these bikes, like, when you can use every gear, you can wind out every aspect of the bike. You can find the limit of the bike is not way beyond your riding ability either. Sure. You can constantly be testing that limit and having fun and really using the full capacity of the machine. Mm-hmm. In the kind of riding that we all actually search out. Yeah. It's accessible and it's right there. So we've talked about kind of rambling and this lightweight, easy goes kind of motorcycling or whatever. You actually wrote a book. Yes. About all of that. Can you tell me about the book and what's in it? Maybe a brief synopsis.
your philosophy behind doing that?
Yeah. So we've been thinking about this whole idea of the activity of riding. What is different about Janus? What is this activity? Rather than saying we're making lightweight, small displacement, handmade. The category gets smaller and smaller and
more
smaller
and more niche,
harder to describe.
Yeah.
And instead, think about what is universal about this and how does it make it more inclusive. And so, by thinking about the activity, you can do this on a sailboat, on a vintage car,
Sure.
or not even vintage, but like something with character.
Right.
Automatic. Mechanical watches, wine. All these things are things that have to do with an activity of enjoying the journey. And so as we thought about that, we were trying to write, I was just writing blog posts basically about that concept and different, applying it to different aspects of life. And then we came up with that idea, like, what would we call this? What is a single word that everyone can understand? And we came up with the idea of rambling. And that's the category that we're kind of trying to create, because there really isn't another bike out there that's trying to do that today. And so the Rambler's Companion is the book. And the Rambler's Companion is kind of a cross between a treatise or a manifesto on rambling and a how-to guide.
Okay.
It's a short little book. You can read it in practically a sitting, but it's sort of a way for people to answer that question and to enjoy the process a little bit. So yeah.
Why is rambling and kind of this style of motorcycle, mechanical watches, that kind of stuff, why is that so important to you? Where does that come from?
Well, I think it probably should be important to everybody.
It probably, yeah.
I mean, once you start thinking about it, it's the things that make our lives better. They're enriching. One of the things that I talk about in the Rambler's Companion is the idea of what leisure is. A lot of times people think leisure is like lying on the sofa and like wasting time.
Sure.
And I take a very different approach to it and say leisure is what you do to make yourself better. It's not necessarily, it's taking time and not necessarily being efficient about or practical. It's about transformation. And
okay.
That those are things that serve that develop meaning, that you have a connection with, that you can pass on to your kids. They participate in that, and so that's what we're trying to do.
I love it. Well, I want to give you an opportunity to brag for a minute, because you've gotten some, like you said, when you first made that moped and got some attention there, you've gotten some pretty big attention from some of these motorcycles, haven't you?
We have. Yeah, we've gotten I think it's because it's relatively audacious to try and make a motor vehicle from scratch, especially the way we've done it. But we've gotten on Jay Leno's garage, which was just incredible. So much fun, not just for the publicity, but to visit his collection.
And did you got to meet him and everything, right?
Meet him. And
yeah.
Wonderful person. So knowledgeable.
Oh, yeah.
We've been able to Wall Street Journal, New York Times, been to the White House
really
with our bikes, which is really cool. Yeah. It's been a wild ride, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, and you just the Griffin 450 is coming out this summer. You're prototyping it and testing it right now, which is super exciting. But what's next for Janus? You got anything in the works that you can talk about, or any kind of big plans coming up in the next, or rather in the near future?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Griffin is really where we're putting a lot of our attention right now, as well as basically coming out with more options and upgrades to support our existing line. As we're really focusing. We're going to be at Sturgis this year.
Oh,
which
cool.
is in a big way.
Yeah.
We're working with Buffalo Chip that puts that on. And we're going to be sponsoring a flat track team around our Griffin 450. We got a great rider. Check our website for more on that. We have sponsorship opportunities. We're really doing it with our owners are the ones that are helping to sponsor the team. Kind of a fun crowd-funded opportunity, and we're really excited to see that happen. We've never been racing, as you can imagine. But yeah, coming out with more options and upgrades, launching this model, and a couple, stay tuned. We got more things up our sleeve too, but we can't talk about them yet.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll just have to come back and do an update or anything. So was that coast to coast trip probably your favorite trip that you've taken on a Janus or not even on a moped? What is your, okay.
It was pretty brutal.
I was say 6 days of hard riding was not the favorite. What is
I've done 3 iron butt rides here to New Orleans in 24 hours on a 250, around Lake Michigan on a 250 in 24 hours. They're fun. And they're what I call fun number 2, which is in retrospect.
Right. Okay. I like that. Yeah.
But the best kind of riding is like a slow, just taking your time, taking the back roads. We did a trip a couple of years back going around Indiana, exploring old towns down along the river, the southern side of Indiana. And that's up in northern Michigan, I'd like to ride up there, some winding roads.
Yeah.
That's the kind of riding I really enjoy doing.
Yeah. You said around Lake Michigan, any of these would be perfect for that. Like go up Michigan City, up M22, up Sleeping Bear.
M22 is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Mackinac, not Mackinac Island, but Mackinac City, and then up on the bridge and all that.
And down.
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
This summer, I'm hoping to take the ferry, the coal ferry, over from Michigan to Wisconsin.
Oh yeah.
The Badger.
I'm guessing that's the slow one, right?
Yes,
because there's the fast one, but
it's coal powered. So.
Okay, yeah. But that's a testament to how you do things. So
it'll be a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I think, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we missed? I mean, it's just an amazing place to be. I mean, you've built an amazing, company from scratch. Some super cool looking motorcycles. And just a beautiful place to do business. So congratulations on all the success so far.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wish that this was, I don't because it'd be really loud, but it was during the week so you could see that the team here working, we're blessed with, it's not just me that's doing this. There's a whole team of folks that are incredibly dedicated, incredibly skilled and passionate about what they're doing that are creating these bikes and creating something that's so meaningful to our owners. So so it's a good place to work, fun adventure. Yeah. Well, cool, man. Can't wait to see what the next adventure is, and I'm sure we'll see you down the line as well. So absolutely. Richard Worsham, thank you, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts, too. If you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure, email us, hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.